Signal Sciences is the industry's first web protection platform that works in any cloud, any container, any platform as a service, and any modern application architecture. The Signal Sciences web protection platform can be deployed in next-generation WAF, RASP, or reverse proxy modes, giving customers ultimate flexibility and coverage. Protect your web applications with Signal Sciences web protection platform. Signal Sciences, securing code and connecting teams. For more information, check them out at signalsciences.com/ESW. Gain control of cyber risk with Tenable.io, the first vulnerability management platform built for today's elastic assets like cloud, containers, and web apps. Discover a fresh, asset-based approach that prioritizes vulnerabilities while seamlessly integrating into your environment. And improve ROI with the first elastic licensing approach based on assets, not IP addresses. Tenable.io delivers the data and context you need to secure your elastic attack surface. Start your free Tenable.io trial today by visiting Tenable.io. Waterfall Security Solutions, the market leader in unidirectional gateway technology. Their industrial cybersecurity technology protects critical infrastructure and control systems from remote online cyber attacks. It's installed around the world, including nuclear plants in the US and electric grids. Their unidirectional security gateway creates an impassable physical barrier preventing communications from flowing into industrial control networks, enabling safe and secure IT and OT integration, remote monitoring, and cloud services. Visit securityweekly.com/SCADA. The first 100 listeners who register will receive a free copy of SCADA Security, What's Broken and How to Fix It, written by Waterfall's VP of Industrial Security, Andrew Ginter. This episode of Enterprise Security Weekly is brought to you by IT Pro TV, an easy, entertaining approach to online IT training. Access over 2,000 hours of up-to-date, high-quality video content live and on demand via your PC, mobile device, and more. For a free 7-day trial and 30% off the lifetime of your account, visit itpro.tv/enterprise security and use the code ES30. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. I'm here with our esteemed panel of Chris, Jack, and Jason, who are presenting an InfoSec World coming up next month on security metrics. I want to start with the question that I always get about security metrics, and people just always ask with like this general question of, well, you know, what security metrics should I show management, for example? I guess we'll start there. Like, what security metrics are they interested in?
Us off with metrics.
Well, I've got two things that I always bring up when I talk about that. I say, you know, there's the metrics that you can put out there, you can measure. You can measure lots of different things. We've all measuring different things. But then one of the things I've always said is you have to understand, the actual data you're getting and how you're presenting it, because it's two different things. The metrics, you can call it metrics or metrics, TRICKS, and showing it in a way that, you know, you're pushing stuff out that's, you're doing a lot of things that show your data, but you want to show it in a way that's very, promotes your agenda, and you want to get
I used to do that all the time. Like, so last month, here's how many packets the firewall blocked. It was like a big number. Yep. And they're like, that's really impressive. We should give you more money for firewalls, right, Paul? Yes, you should.
And that's a good example of where I think a lot of people in IT use metrics wrong. We buy these tools; they come with great dashboards. You can see, how many phishing messages did you block, how many packets did you block at the firewall. That data really has no value to a CFO or CIO because you can't make a decision on that chart. What you really got to do is think more around a balance sheet. In a balance sheet, I can look down at what are the critical components within the organization, where is the money being spent, what was last year's fiscal, what was my target, and what's this year. So it clearly, so someone who's coming in can look at this balance sheet who might not know anything about the company and can see where did we spend money last year, what was our hope this year, and where are we going and what happened as the result. And now you can actually make a decision. And you can drive change once you make a decision from that kind of data versus an arbitrary number of, I blocked 8,000 spam messages. Is 8,000 a lot? Is that good? Is it bad? How did that change?
You want to select metrics that move the change you want.
And I'll to tag off your question too. I think it was, what metrics should I report to management? I like to look at it as there there's different ways you're going to use these things, right? So you're going to probably have some kind of set of metrics, some kind of dashboard that you report to maybe the CIO, maybe a different one you report to the board, and you absolutely should have something different that you use to manage your own security program. The stuff that you care about day to day is not the stuff that they care about from a how do I make decisions about the direction of the company. They should be related. One might build the other, but that's something I think everybody should really think about as well, is what do I care about to drive my program, and what does the company care about to drive our business?
Well, I think there's two things that I hear from that is that one that I was hoping I was going to hear too is one that your audience matters, right? Who you're presenting these metrics to, and then almost like the why, like what goals do you have, and what goals do you think your audience has, and that is, I think, some of the fundamentals for starting to develop metrics.
You need to absolutely begin with the end in mind.
And I think a big one there too is you want to try to avoid the surprises. You want to put some metrics out there so when you're meeting with your peers, your CIO, so that you're putting a constant communication out to these guys, so that there's not a shock when you say, hey, I also run part of our infrastructure department, and as we're going every month and we're running out of storage or whatever that metric I'm measuring is, I'm reporting back on it every month and showing that, so that I can say, hey, 6 months from now I'm going to run out. So it's not a surprise when I have to go in and ask for more capital, because that same message has been coming across month after month, as opposed to come in and say, surprise, I'm here for a lot of capital because I'm totally out of whatever metric I'm looking at.
So when you're reporting meaningful metrics on a regular basis in a consistent way, what you really are doing is building trust. So that way, when you do have to do that ask, it's not a surprise. It's going to be an easy approval. And then, because we're in IT, things always go bump in the night. And, it's nice to be able to have those one-offs, but for the regular normal operation, it's consistent, it's reported, and it's in line with what the expectations you've been setting all along.
You're building your street cred.
One of the questions that gets posed in different surveys is this sort of scenario that says, well, your CEO comes to you and asks you the question, how secure are we today? And I think probably a few years ago, I may have posed that question and asked what metrics, but what I hear, the gist of what you're saying is that your CEO should never have to ask that question. He or she should already know, right? If you're doing metrics correctly, the way you started to describe it, they shouldn't have to ask that question. They should already know, right?
I would say there's a couple things that go into that too. 100%, you should be proactively reporting. If you wait for somebody to ask you, you haven't done your job. And I think a lot of security guys do that, and then you're playing catch up. I'll speak directly to that question too, though, which is that question's it's one of risk, right? So something that I usually will do is part of that sort of scorecard that would go to the CEO of the company that answers that question is, right, the heat map, right? Everybody's seen a heat map, red, yellow, green. What are my risks, right? But it's an important tool, and that's the answer, because that's something I'm going to show my CEO and my board probably every quarter. We've all been through this. We've all talked about this. Here's what's in the red. Here's the projects I'm executing on to get those things out of the red. Here's the things in the red that we've all agreed we're not going to do anything about. And then if we get deeper into the metrics level, maybe there's operational stuff that is helping to move the needle related to those risks as well. So I see kind of the risk and the metrics piece really coupling together from a how do I tell how security is doing?
And you really build that through, you have to identify things by working with other people in the business, so that way you get alignment. So as Chris was saying, he's already had those meetings with the other stakeholders, so there's already been an establishment of what is the appropriate level of risk in these areas. What's the agreed upon target, and what's the agreed upon where are we at? So that way, these numbers, you're not just going in and presenting them for the first time. You've already worked with them to build what the thresholds are. And it's that identification, alignment, and then continuous communication, and then show the reporting and the results.
And I'll say show progress, show progression kind of over time too. Show that, hey, we started where we're at today. Hopefully that paints a nice picture for you. It says, hey, we started with so many vulnerabilities, and we've been able to, take a risk-based approach on those, knock out the higher ones, and make progress. I think that's a big thing to show in that.
Yeah.
One of the things that people in the trenches typically ask me, and this is very common because they have a purview of security for most of the organization, the whole organization, or sometimes pretty damn close, right, depending on the size. And they're like, I know that there's problems with specific groups. Like, I know that that group never patches their stuff. That group's a little better, but they kind of struggle with metrics that they can present to their managers and their managers to say, I need help. I need help fixing these problems. What type of metrics do you suggest in a general sense for people in that situation? I know there's a lot of us that say, I need help. I don't know if that's resources. It could be, but they just need help getting those metrics to understand first what the problems are, and then what do I ask for resources, and then how do I convince management to get those resources?
So I've got a story that speaks directly to that one, right? And the key here, it's not always the thing you're measuring, but it's how you're using it, right? Again, keep in mind, these things are all a means to an end. But I've got a great example of that one where talking with folks in an organization, they're all telling me, we were going through building out the metrics program, and patching is always one. And okay, it looks pretty good on the desktops. What do we do for servers? Well, we don't really patch the servers. I'm like, what do you mean we don't patch the servers? Well, and you kind of heard this from me earlier. The system admins don't like the idea of an SCCM agent on those servers. It's, very difficult for their jobs, et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, okay, well, do you think it's good to not patch the servers? No, but nobody will listen to me. I'm like, okay. So how about we include that one? What do you mean? On our scorecard, right? So we've got 85% compliant for the desktops. Great. 0% for the servers. I don't even have to go out and look at SCCM and measure it because it doesn't exist, and I know the answer is 0% if we set our compliance threshold at 1 month. So we did that, and we reported every single month, 0%, 0%. And after this happened for a while, they'd been intractable, right? Nobody wanted to talk about what was going on with the servers. They knew it was a problem, everybody did, but it wasn't really kind of getting the right visibility. As soon as you see that goose egg month after month, directors start asking questions. What is that? What is that? And sure enough, now there's a project. We're rolling out SCCM for the servers to start patching that stuff. And the really important thing about that story is I didn't go over to the server guys and say, you guys are idiots, you need to start patching. The security team in-house, they didn't go over to those guys and say that. We just started reporting the information. And once we started reporting it, it became painfully obvious to everybody that that's what needed to happen, and we let it be volunteered as opposed to being kind of the hammer of doom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my CIO has a great quote, data doesn't have an agenda. And, a lot of times, I remember when I was a little more junior, it's a little scary to put up a negative or a bad finding. No one wants to see red on their report, but there is value in reporting a negative. And you can enact change for that if you're willing to, kind of own up and show where you have a deficiency.
I think one of the other things that we talked about before was, also getting involved in part of that, and being part of that change, kind of getting on the boat, I think is very important too. Yeah. So just if you go out and dictate that, hey, we need to do this, that doesn't normally help in order to get the things done that needs to happen. So
yeah, that's a continuing theme that we've heard on the show. Jim Routh was on last week's episode. He's the CISO for Aetna, and really was a proponent of when you have that group that's performing at 0 on the security scale, going to them and saying, how can we help you? How can we make your job easier? Not even putting security in that conversation. And doing that, I think, in combination with metrics, and say, hey, look, if we can help you, I'd almost pitch it to them as, if you start at 0, there's a lot of room for growth. You're going to look awesome on your performance reviews, right? Because there's going to be tons of growth, and we'll help you with that. And I think those are the positive things. I think that goes along, Jason, with what you were saying is, be part of the solution for that team as well. I don't like the idea of publicly shaming different groups in the organization. I think that if you're going to do that, it has to be coupled with some relationship building as well.
Well said.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
In terms of doing that, are there other metrics that you recommend for people in terms of incidents, right? Because we've talked a little bit about vulnerability and missing processes and things of that nature. I've also seen a great example came from Marcus Random. You guys have probably seen this, right? Where the person worked for a university, and he was like, "Hey, I'm seeing all these security incidents, and if I look at them in such a way that the systems that are not managed by the central IT department, let's total up all their incidents, and then let's total up the incidents that are from systems managed by the central IT." And he came up with a bar chart, and it was a lot higher. And he presented that to management, and essentially it sends the very simple message: we'll have less incidents if central IT can help manage the systems. And that really resonated in this organization. Are there other examples like that that you folks have in terms of the security incident metrics?
So at another organization I was at, we had a similar situation. And what we did was, again, it's that begin with the end in mind. We knew we had a problem. But if you can't just go forward when you have an idea, you need to have data behind it. So we actually started tracking kind of the top vulnerabilities by location and by line of business. Started looking at legacy systems by location and line of business. Started looking at where's local admin and accounts with domain admin rights. What are the number of security incidences by location and line of business? And we also really started looking at the ticketing system. Where are we spending more of our time supporting users, answering questions? It's amazing how much progress I've been able to make in security and IT by actually looking at the data of the reoccurring events that are happening in the service desk in our own tickets. And then once you have the data, you present the data as it is. And the data doesn't have an agenda, and it will support your story, or it won't. It actually could maybe lead you in a different direction. There's been some times where I've thought, this is where we are losing problems and times. You do a root cause analysis and you find out, actually, it's this. And let's start a project. Let's engage with that group. And now we can eliminate these reoccurring incidents from happening.
Sounds like going down the security metrics path that you're suggesting is a good thing to do. It probably doesn't cost a whole lot of money. I don't need to buy a whole bunch of special tools. And before I go do projects and buy stuff and try and implement solutions, I should probably do some security metrics, right?
Yeah. I think that's a great point. You don't need a lot of tools or a lot of money. When you get back or you're done listening to this podcast, grab your team and just find a few things that they can do. The first time may take them an hour. But then after that, find some metrics that are easy to collect monthly. Take them 15, 20 minutes. And don't get caught up on, hey, I need to have all these pretty graphs and have a huge picture day one. Let it build itself out over time. And you may not know some of the stories that you're going to present, but start collecting the data and don't get hung up and also trying to show, hey, what happened last year? Start from today and move it forward.
Mm. What advice in general do you have when you are the security person and you're first, I guess a two-part question, you're presenting to systems administrators, network administrators, some security metrics, and then also you're presenting to management. What other than the data things that we talked about, what other tips do you have when you go do that as a security professional?
I'll jump in on this one. We talked a little bit about stakeholders and audiences and kind of hinted on this kind of public shaming piece, which I agree with you. You don't want to call people out. And some of them worked really well for me. So I'll hop back to vulnerability management. In an organization, we built out this process. We didn't have one, right? We had some scans that maybe went on sporadically. There was no process for what happens with the results, et cetera. We needed to do something. So a way of doing that would be to just take the results out of my scans and go, okay, the scanner says all this stuff is critical. We're going to fix the stuff that's critical. That stuff that the server team's going to take care of. That stuff the network team's going to take care of. That tends not to be as effective. And so what I found worked a lot better was we came up with a definition, critical, high, medium, low, specific to our company. And when I say we, the group was me and the managers of all the teams that I would go to get that stuff fixed. so that when I went there, I already had their management bought in. So I guess the advice there is have your stakeholders, and your stakeholders are the people that are fixing the problems, right? Mm-hmm. Have them involved in how you develop the processes that are going to measure them. I found it hugely powerful. When you're building the measuring stick, they'll be really objective. You'll all be on the same page. They might disagree later when they're measured by it, but it's incredibly difficult to come back to me and say, I completely disagree with the fact that you say this should be fixed because it's critical, when you helped me develop the definition of what's critical.
Right. And also you're compensating controls as well, which is important. And like we were talking last week, I find that organizations that are the most successful have developed their own processes and even developed their own systems to do that. Now, not every organization can do that, but the ones that have are wildly successful at very specifically, Chris, vulnerability and patch management.
Absolutely.
And a big part of that is knowing your audience there too. You know, if you're going in and you're presenting metrics to a bunch of system admins, you can absolutely use terms like SIM, vulnerability management. They'll know what you're talking about. If you're going for your CIO or above, you want to go in and say a patch man. You don't want to use those terms that are security specific. You want to be more general.
Absolutely, yeah, and keep it very high level, right? I think it was
Absolutely.
Jim last week, CSO, was very very transparent in saying I want to make sure I have a job when I wake up in the morning, right? So if you look at it like that, like how can you help people like Jim keep their jobs? And that's not, when you start getting into the weeds, that gets lost, right? And I agree, Jason, that your language needs to change. So what other tips do you have for our audience about security metrics? Not to give away everything in your talk, because people should go watch your talk, but what other tips do you have for people?
I would say you want to start out simply. It's easy to try to build an elegant metrics program right out of the gate, and you'll spend a lot of time, and you might then be going to then look for a solution for it since you spent so much time building it. Start simply, bring in other stakeholders from in the organization or within IT, because you almost want to create like a charter around this. It's ideally if you could put together a steering committee, so that way you have a group of people that have agreed, we are going to review this data on a regular basis. We're going to dig into the data, and we're going to interpret the data. And start with fewer amount of sources of data. It's so easy now to be overloaded with data. Pick a couple of core problems or reoccurring events or risks that could lose your job, and focus on those and keep it very small, and then build it out. That's probably the biggest advice I'd have for someone.
I'll say take a business-based approach to metrics. Kind of tie things back to your business. What's driving? What makes your company make money? Be profitable. What would resonate most with them? So I think that's a really key thing I'd throw out there.
Chris, did you want to chime in there?
Yeah, no, I'll tell you what, I couldn't agree more with these guys, right? Aligning with the business is absolutely huge. Getting in the boat with everybody else is absolutely huge. I'll echo Jason as well. I always say you shouldn't spend more than an hour a month putting your scorecard together, right? Doing your latest report. If you're spending a full day, if you're spending 2 days, you've over-engineered the whole process. I see that one a lot. I see a lot of, I just pull exactly what my tool gives me. And I see a lot of analysis paralysis because I don't have the perfect data, and let me integrate these 6 different systems and let me develop the fancy scorecard when, you know what, I've already got stuff that I can report on today, and some of those things are non-obvious. It doesn't have to be a data feed coming out of a system. It could be something that you just note yourself. For example, one I always like to track for a security department is how good are we at engaging with the organization, right? And that's a very fuzzy thing. It's also, by the way, something which if I don't track somehow is probably the very first thing I'm going to forget about. I'm going to get sucked into the incidents that happen and vulnerabilities that my tools are telling me about, and communicating to my employees, I don't think about at all. So I love putting on a scorecard that engagement metric, right? What is that? Did we post stuff on the intranet? Did we have lunch and learns and brown bags and, those kinds of events? Because I want to be doing that. and I want to see if that's happening. And I also want to be able to see that as the incident count goes up, the engagement goes down, which makes the incident account probably go even higher, right? You get that nice correlation. So I guess the advice in there, don't be afraid to look at some of those soft and fuzzy things, right? You can measure that too. It's not real hard to just know, here's how many times I went out and presented to my coworkers.
A mistake that I see people get into is sometimes they get too focused on the data. And the data is not the value. It is your analysis. Take the time to analyze the data, connect it back to how it impacts your business, and you need to always put a recommendation or guidance to the data. So when someone reads it or looks at it, again, if it's data and there's not a decision to be made, it's probably not the right data. You want to have a metric where a decision can be made and you're providing guidance or a recommendation on what you should do to move the change in the direction you're looking for. So it's your analysis that's really what's more important than the data itself.
That's great advice. And it's a great jacket, Jack, and I look forward to. I hope you wear that in Orlando. By the way, I know it's going to be kind of warm, but I do hope you wear that. That way, I can spot you in the crowd too. But Chris, Jack, and Jason will be at InfoSec World. I look forward to seeing all of you, and that will conclude this edition of Enterprise Security Weekly. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
for having us, Paul.